Good morning and welcome back. Myself Dr. Gibran Ahmed presents to you Simply Pathology, and today we are back with a very interesting lecture. So as you can already see the caption, today we are going to start with the myocardial infarction. So what are the things that today we are going to see in this particular lecture? We are going to read about ischemic heart disease in general. We are going to see what is angina and the different forms of angina, and we are going to read in details about myocardial infarction. So what are the things that you are going to see in this particular lecture? We are going to see some basics about myocardial infarction, the vessels which are involved, the ECG changes, what the different types of infarct, the gross and the microscopic appearance, reperfusion injury, clinical features, the cardiac biomarkers, and the complications of MI. So these are the important things that we are going to see in today's lecture. And remember, myocardial infarction is a very important question, not only in undergraduate but also in postgraduate. So let us start first with ischemic heart disease. So basically ischemic heart disease encompasses a spectrum of diseases like myocardial infarction, angina pectoris, chronic ischemic heart disease with heart failure, and sudden cardiac death. Remember, the most common cause of ischemic heart disease is myocardial ischemia. In 90% of the cases, this ischemia is occurring because of atherosclerotic obstruction. So what are the other causes? What are the other 10% of the causes of ischemic heart disease? So sometimes there can be emboli, there can be vessel spasm, there can be inflammation of the vessels, vasculitis. Okay, remember there is a very important MCQ that comes that the coronary artery disease becomes significant when more than 70% of the coronary vascular cross-sectional area is obstructed. So when more than 70% obstruction occurs of the coronary arteries, that is a significant disease, and this stenosis is called as a critical stenosis. It is the threshold for symptomatic ischemia precipitated by exercise. So if there is a more than 70% obstruction of the coronary arteries, so on exertion, okay, on carrying out any physical activity, ischemia will happen. Okay, there will be chest pain. Now, when the obstruction is more than 90% of the lumen, so if more than 90% of the coronary artery cross-sectional area is blocked or obstructed, this is going to lead to an inadequate coronary blood supply, and you are going to have chest pain even at rest. So even at rest, you are going to have symptoms of ischemia. So now there are three major coronary epicardial vessels which are affected in ischemic heart disease. Number one is the left anterior descending, then we are having the left circumflex artery, and then we are having the right coronary artery. So left anterior descending artery, left circumflex artery, and right coronary artery. So these are the three important coronary vessels which are implicated in ischemic heart disease. Now we are going to see about angina. Very important question. Okay, a lot of MCQs are coming from angina pectoris. So angina pectoris is basically an entity. It's an ischemic heart disease which is characterized by paroxysmal and recurrent attacks of substernal or precordial chest pain, which is caused by transient myocardial ischemia that is not sufficient to cause necrosis or infarction. So over here there is a chest pain which is occurring because of ischemia, and it is quite transient. It is lasting for approximately 15 seconds to 15 minutes. Okay, so in short, we can say that angina pectoris is nothing but ischemia without infarction. So it is just ischemia. There is no infarction, there is no myocardial cell death in angina pectoris. Just because of ischemia, because of the reduced blood flow to the heart, there is chest pain. That is what angina pectoris is. Now there are three important types of angina pectoris. Number one, we are having stable angina pectoris. It is also called as the typical variety of angina pectoris. It is the most common form of angina. It does not occur at rest. Okay, and the most common cause of stable angina is chronic atherosclerosis. Now over here, in case of stable angina, the pain is occurring during physical activity or when you are exerting some, when you are doing some work, okay, when you are exerting yourself, okay, even because of any mental stress or emotional excitement, it can also occur. And classically, the hallmark of stable angina is that it is relieved by rest or by use of vasodilators like nitroglycerin or calcium channel blockers. Okay, so this is the most common form of angina, that is the stable angina, also called as the typical angina. The second variety of angina pectoris is your Prinzmetal angina. It is also called as the variant form of angina. It is an uncommon form and it is episodic. Okay, it occurs, now the basic mechanism of Prinzmetal angina is vasospasm, and it is not related to physical activity. Okay, but one good thing is that it is also responding to vasodilators like nitroglycerin and calcium channel blockers. And the third variety, also called as the unstable angina, the other name is crescendo variety of angina. It is frequent and it is quite prolonged. It is prolonged for more than 20 minutes. So the chest pain in this case is lasting for more than 20 minutes. Basically, it is a severe form of angina which is precipitated by lower levels of physical activity or rest, and it is mainly occurring due to plaque disruption. Okay, due to plaque disruption, the atherosclerotic plaque is breaking down, which is exposing the endothelium, leading to thrombosis, and ultimately there is a superimposed embolism. Remember, one very important thing is that it cannot be, it is not relieved by rest. Okay, it is not relieved by rest. So there is severe kind of pain in unstable angina even at rest. So I hope everything about angina is clear. Now we are coming to the main topic of today's discussion, that is myocardial infarction. So let us begin. So basically, myocardial infarction, okay, what is commonly known as heart attack. The most common cause of myocardial infarction in 90% of the case is atherosclerosis. So here we are having an atherosclerotic plaque which over a period of time undergoes erosion. Then there will be hemorrhage, and that is going to expose the endothelium, and that is going to activate the endothelium and the platelets, leading to superimposed thrombosis. So in 90% of the cases, it is because of atherosclerosis. Okay, now what are the other causes of myocardial infarction? So other causes which is contributing 10% of the causes of myocardial infarction are vasospasm, okay, drugs like cocaine, embolus, okay, arising from the thrombus or infective vegetations. Okay, so emboli which is arising from mural thrombus means thrombus which is formed inside the chambers of the heart, and vegetations which are of infective endocarditis. Other causes include vasculitis, that is inflammation of the vessels, shock, left ventricular hypertrophy, and amyloidosis. So these are the other causes which is coming under 10% causes of MI. Now if we look at this particular graph, it is very, very important to understand. So the first graph on the left hand side, okay, so as soon as the myocardial infarction occurs, the heart is not being able to contract. Okay, and that part of the area of the myocardium, okay, where the blood supply has been lost, what is going to happen? There is a decreased amount of ATP, whereas there is an increased amount of lactate. Okay, I repeat, in the area where there is your infarction, okay, initially the amount of ATP levels is going to come down, and the amount of lactate goes up. Okay, now if you see over here, okay, there is a phase, okay, that is called as a reversible phase. So the first half an hour of blockage, or the first half an hour of ischemia, myocardial ischemia, is the reversible phase. Okay, it is lasting for approximately 30 minutes. Okay, and beyond this phase, what is going to happen? The myocardium is going to die. It will undergo necrosis, and irreversible injury is going to continue. Okay, so if you take any kind of intervention, or if the patient is receiving any kind of treatment in that particular point of time, if you see the myocardium can be salvaged or can be saved. Okay, so I will repeat once again all these points. So as soon as the myocardial blood supply is lost, the amount of ATP formation will reduce, whereas the amount of lactate formation is going to increase. Now during the first half an hour, okay, the injury is reversible, so there is just ischemia without any irreversible injury. But after half an hour, what is going to happen? The myocardium is not going to tolerate the loss of blood, and as a result there will be a cumulative dead myocardium. So the amount of dead myocardium will increase as the amount of hours is going to increase, okay? Whereas as the time increases, if the patient receives treatment, so the sooner you will act, the better it is, the more myocardium you will be able to save. Okay, so as you can see from this graph, so as the time is going, okay, the amount of myocardium that you can save also reduces. So it is very important that you act very soon in case of ischemia. Okay, so let us see what are the key events which is taking place when there is a myocardial infarction. So this is a very important chart. Lot of MCQs are coming from this particular chart. So the onset of ATP depletion occurs very fast. Within seconds, the myocardium will lose the contractility in less than 2 minutes. Now the ATP, the amount of ATP which is produced, okay, the ATP is reduced to 50% of normal amounts within 10 minutes and to 10% of the normal amount within 40 minutes. An irreversible injury occurs in 20 to 40 minutes. So if you have to choose a single answer, so you remember, so after 30 minutes, okay, more than 30 minutes, irreversible cell injury will occur, and if you have to choose a basic range, 20 to 40 minutes is the best answer. Microvascular injury occurs more than 1 hour. So remember, the onset of ATP depletion is occurring in seconds. The loss of contractility of the myocardium occurs in less than 2 minutes. ATP levels are reduced to 50% of normal in 10 minutes. 10% of normal in 40 minutes. Irreversible cell injury, it occurs after 30 minutes. If you have to choose a range, it will be 20 to 40 minutes, and microvascular injury occurs in more than 1 hour. So the irreversible myocardial damage occurs after 30 minutes of severe ischemia when the blood flow is 10% or less of the normal blood flow. Okay, so after 30 minutes is very important MCQ. Okay, so remember, if you have to choose a single answer, it will be after 30 minutes irreversible myocardial damage occurs. Remember, the irreversible injury will first involve the subendocardial region of the myocardium. So if you remember, from inside to outside, we are having the endocardium, myocardium and the pericardium. Okay, so remember, all the coronaries are epicardial. Okay, they are situated on the outer side of the heart. So basically the endocardium is farthest away from the coronaries. So the first area to be involved by irreversible injury is the endocardial or the subendocardial region. Okay, so irreversible injury is first occurring in the subendocardial region because it is the least perfused region of the heart. So what are the different types of infarcts that occur? One is your transmural infarct, which is the most common type of myocardial infarction. What is the meaning of transmural? That is, the full thickness of the myocardium is going to undergo infarction. That is, the endocardium, myocardium as well as the pericardium is going to be involved. Okay, so it occurs due to chronic atherosclerosis or plaque change with superimposed thrombosis, and such kind of transmural infarct can be recognized in ECG or electrocardiography as ST elevation myocardial infarction, also called as STEMI. Okay, now the other variety of infarct is your non-transmural or the subendocardial infarct. Now this is occurring due to the lysis of the thrombotic plaque or because of severe reduction in the blood pressure because of shock in the setting of chronic atherosclerosis. So this is the reason of non-transmural subendocardial infarct, meaning the whole thickness of the myocardium will not undergo infarction. Why? Because probably in the process of thrombotic plaque which was obstructing, probably there was lysis of that particular thrombus, because the patient must have received some treatment or some therapy. So part of the area of the myocardium is infarcted, whereas rest of the areas are normal. Okay, so such kind of infarct in the ECG is going to show non-ST elevation myocardial infarction, also called as NSTEMI. So these are the two important kinds of infarcts. So now let us see the ECG changes. So this is the normal electrocardiograph showing the P wave, which is representing atrial contraction or atrial depolarization. QRS wave, which is representing the ventricular depolarization or the ventricular contraction, and the T wave, which is representing ventricular repolarization or relaxation. Okay, this is the normal ECG. Now, in case of myocardial infarction, okay, where there is a transmural or full thickness infarct, the ECG will characteristically show you the ST elevation. As you can see, just compare it with this. So see the ST segment over here and compare it with the ST segment over here. So there is an ST segment elevation in the ECG or the electrocardiograph. Okay, so basically this is the very common variety of myocardial infarction, and where it is imperative that you recognize this elevation, okay, once you are seeing the ECG of the patient. Okay, so ST elevation is very important to recognize. Now this is the NSTEMI or the non-ST segment elevation myocardial infarction. So over here there is ST segment depression, which is indicated by the blue arrow, and T wave inversion, that is there is a negative T wave. So you can see the different kinds. Okay, so in the different kinds of the leads you can see this. Okay, so there is ST segment depression and T wave inversion in case of NSTEMI infarction. So let us see the most important vessels which are implicated in myocardial infarction. So there we are having the right coronary artery, the left anterior descending coronary artery, and the left circumflex coronary artery. So one very important thing, as you can see over here, all these coronary vessels, they are epicardial, they are present in the outer surface. Okay, so once there is an obstruction, for example, okay, this is the endocardium, which is the inner lining of the heart. Okay, so the coronary vessels are situated on the outer aspect in the epicardium, so they are also called as epicardial coronary vessels. So once they are obstructed, okay, which is the area which is more at risk? Okay, it is the endocardium, because it is farthest or it is farther from the coronaries. Okay, so basically if you see, initially the zone of necrosis is subendocardial. Okay, but later on, if no treatment is received by the patient, it will become full thickness transmural infarct. Okay, now one very important point over here that I want to say, if you can see just beneath the subendocardium, if you see just beneath the subendocardium, there is a small area, okay, which has not undergone necrosis. Why? Because this part of the endocardium is spared from necrosis because the oxygen and nutrition is provided by diffusion from the ventricle. Okay, so the ventricle itself has oxygen, which is providing oxygen to the superficial layer of the endocardium. So that is why very small area of the endocardium, which is immediately beneath, okay, beneath the endocardial surface, it does not undergo infarction. Okay, because it is getting oxygen and nutrition provided by diffusion from the ventricle. Okay, now this is a very important picture. Okay, so first of all, over here if you see, this is an example of transmural infarct. Okay, and on the right hand side we are having non-transmural infarct. So as we know, the transmural infarcts are involving the full thickness of the myocardium. So if there is a permanent occlusion of the left anterior descending branch, so this part is basically supplying the anterior wall of the left ventricle, the anterior part of the interventricular septum, as well as the apex. So when there is a obstruction of this particular left anterior descending branch, if you see, okay, there is a full thickness infarct, as you can see in this diagram. Okay, full thickness infarct involving the anterior wall of the left ventricle, the anterior part of the interventricular septum, as well as the apex. Secondly, if there is a permanent occlusion of the left circumflex branch, you can see that there is an infarction of the lateral wall of the left ventricle. Yes, full thickness. And thirdly, if you can see, when there is a occlusion of the right coronary artery, it is causing full thickness infarct involving the posterior wall of the left, posterior or the inferior wall of the left ventricle, and the posterior 2/3 of the interventricular septum, as well as the posterior or inferior surface of the right ventricle. So this is how the transmural infarcts look like. Now the non-transmural infarcts, it basically occurs if there is a restoration of the blood flow. So if there is not complete obstruction of the coronaries, then this is going to happen. So if there is a transient or partial obstruction, so there will be a regional subendocardial infarct. So for example, there is a partial obstruction of the left anterior descending branch, so there will be a non-transmural or subendocardial infarct involving the left and anterior wall of the left ventricle, involving the anterior interventricular septum as well as the apex. So suppose all the three vessels are now partially obstructed. Okay, the LAD, the left circumflex as well as the right coronary arteries, all the three are partially involved. So there will be a circumferential subendocardial infarct as is depicted in this diagram. Okay, and it is not a full thickness. It is circumferential but not full thickness infarct. So all the parts of the left ventricle, the whole of the interventricular septum, the inferior surface of the left ventricle is involved. Okay, and lastly, if you see, sometimes there is very minute microinfarcts, okay, because of a small intramural microembolisms. Okay, so you can find very small microinfarcts across this myocardium. Okay, so this is how transmural and non-transmural infarcts occur. Okay, so now let us see. Okay, so basically, as we already have seen, that the subendocardial infarct or the non-transmural infarct can be of two types. It can either be circumferential because of global hypotension as in shock, or there might be small intramural microinfarcts because of very small embolus, microembolization, vasculitis or vasospasm. Now let us see the branches of the coronaries which are involved. So remember, in most common cases or in maximum cases, 40 to 50% of the cases, it is the left anterior descending coronary artery which is blocked. Okay, and that is basically, it will lead to infarction in the anterior wall of the left ventricle near the apex, anterior part of the interventricular septum as well as the apex. In 30 to 40% of the cases, it is the right coronary artery which is blocked and which is causing infarction. It will involve the inferior or the posterior wall of the left ventricle, posterior part of the interventricular septum and inferior or posterior right ventricular free wall. Now if the in around 15 to 20% of the cases, it is the left circumflex artery which is involved, that is going to involve the lateral wall of the left ventricle except the apex. So this is the distribution of the coronaries, and this is the frequencies with which these vessels are involved in myocardial infarction. Again, very important from MCQ point of view. Okay, so now we will go towards the morphological features of myocardial infarction. Okay, so remember, the gross and the microscopic appearance of infarct we are going to read it, but before that we have to understand that myocardial infarction, okay, which is less than 12 hours old, is usually not apparent grossly. So you cannot see any visible infarction, okay, grossly if it is in less than 12 hours. And if we want to see infarction, okay, within 12 hours, then this can be highlighted by immersing the tissue slices in triphenyl tetrazolium chloride. So the viable myocardium will become red because of the preservation of LDH activity, okay, whereas the infarcted areas, they are pale because of leakage of the LDH. So as you remember, infarct area is nothing but area of coagulative necrosis. So once necrosis occurs, the enzymes are going to leak out of the cell. Why? Because there is a damage to the plasma membrane. So that is why, okay, whenever you are dipping a piece of myocardial tissue within this triphenyl tetrazolium chloride, so the viable myocardium will be red in color because of preserved LDH activity, whereas the infarcted areas are pale because of leakage of LDH. So this is that particular slice of the myocardium. So you can see that this is one portion. So the area of the infarct, as I have shown with this arrow, it is completely pale because there is a loss of LDH activity over here, whereas the rest of the myocardium, if you see, it is completely red. Okay, it is completely red. So myocardial infarction in this particular diagram is shown by lack of staining by triphenyl tetrazolium chloride. So the substance which we are using is triphenyl tetrazolium chloride, and the positive test for myocardial infarction is lack of staining by triphenyl tetrazolium chloride. So the absence of staining is indicating the presence of infarct. Okay, now let us look at this particular chart. I cannot tell you the importance of this chart. It is very, very, very important. It comes as a full question, okay, and lots of MCQs are coming from this part. So remember, in the first half hour, the the injury is reversible in nature. So there is no light microscopic changes, and in the electron microscope you just have a little bit of mitochondrial swelling. So in the first half to 4 hours, again no gross features are seen, okay, but the earliest change, the earliest sign of irreversibility is the presence of waviness of the fibers at the border. So the myocardial fibers becomes wavy in nature. So there's a waviness. I will show you the diagrams in detail, okay, subsequently. And what is the earliest change of irreversibility in the electron microscope? It is the same as the earliest change that is seen in necrosis, that is the presence of amorphous densities within the mitochondria. So these are the two MCQs over here. So the earliest change of irreversibility under the light microscope, we are having the waviness of the fibers, myocardial fibers, and in the electron microscopy it is the presence of mitochondrial amorphous densities. So by 4 to 12 hours there is occasional dark mottling, okay, grossly. Under the microscope, early coagulative necrosis, edema and hemorrhage takes place. In 12 to 24 hours the dark mottling becomes very visible, and there is an ongoing coagulative necrosis along with the features of necrosis like pycnosis, okay, hypereosinophilia will be there, okay. There is what is called as a marginal contraction band necrosis. Now this contraction band necrosis is associated with reperfusion injury, and I am going to show you about this in the later part of the video, okay. And over here there is an early neutrophilic infiltrate. Now in 1 to 3 days, grossly the area of the infarct will be mottled or dark, okay, but the center of the infarct will have yellowish tan infarct. The center will be yellowish in color. But very important, under the light microscopy over here you are having maximum amount of coagulative necrosis along with brisk interstitial infiltrate of neutrophils. So there is a lot of neutrophilic infiltration. So remember, if the question is that coagulative necrosis occurs in which part, it is in 1 to 3 days that you will choose as an answer. So coagulative necrosis along with brisk neutrophilic infiltration is taking place in 1 to 3 days, and this is an important MCQ that is asked. By 3 to 7 days, grossly there is a hyperemic or reddish border around the area of the infarct, and the central part becomes more yellow and becomes soft. So under the microscope what we are going to see that now the neutrophils are getting replaced by the phagocytes, that is the macrophages are entering, okay. At this point the macrophages are entering and they are carrying out phagocytosis. So this is the early stage of phagocytosis that is occurring. By 7 to 10 days what is happening, that grossly the center is becoming maximally yellowish in color and they are very soft and the margins are depressed, okay, depressed red margins at the periphery. Remember one thing, that under the microscope over here in 7 to 10 days there is a lot of phagocytosis. This is taking place. So there is a well developed phagocytosis of the dead cells and the granulation tissue starts to appear at the margin. By 10 to 14 days, okay, the infarct borders, if you see, there's a reddish gray depressed infarct borders, whereas over here you are having well established granulation tissue with the formation of new blood vessels and collagen deposition. So around 2 to 8 weeks you will see grossly there's a grayish white scar, and progressively from the border towards the core of the infarct you will see that the infarct is now turning whitish to gray because scar formation is taking place, whereas you will see excessive amount of collagen deposition with decreased cellularity by 2 to 8 weeks, and more than 2 months the scarring is complete and light microscopy will just reveal dense collagenous scar formation. So I know this is difficult to by heart, but you will have to by heart this because a lot of MCQs are coming and I will give you some important points also. So let us first see this. Can you see this wavy myocardial tissue? This is wavy. There is no nucleus present, okay, in these myocardial fibers. Can you see the neutrophilic infiltrate? So over here the coagulative necrosis along with the wavy fibers and along with the scattered neutrophils you can see on the left hand side, okay. Now if you see on the right hand side, this is the normal myocardium, okay, whereas on the left hand side this is the myocardium which is showing signs of irreversibility, the earliest sign, that is the wavy nature of the myocardial fiber. This is the second image. If you see over here, the coagulative necrosis is very prominent. So you cannot see any nuclear structures. It is just eosinophilic masses of coagulative necrosis, and there is a lot of neutrophilic infiltrate is there. So whenever the term coagulative necrosis or neutrophilic infiltration is used, remember it is day 1 to 3 in which it is most prominent. Okay. Now this is the third. Now you can see that there is clearing of all the myocardial fibers. So the fibers have reduced in size and there is infiltration by the mononuclear cells, that is the phagocytes. The macrophages have come in and they are carrying out phagocytosis of the dead myocardium, okay, is being carried out. Now this is very characteristic here. This is a granulation tissue which is containing the leaky new blood vessels, that is there is a neovascularization over here. Along with that there is a deposition of collagen also, which is shown by the stain Maison's trichome, okay, which is showing the collagen as a bluish deposition. So the collagen deposition has just started over here. Granulation tissue is there, so the healing process has begun, and over here the healing process is actually complete. There is a dense collagen fiber and in between you can see the hypertrophied myocardium. Now why? Because any viable myocardium around the area of the infarct, it undergoes hypertrophy so as to compensate for the loss of the myocardial tissue. Okay, so this is seen in this particular image. Okay, so grossly, what are the most important events which you should keep in mind? So within 12 hours, less than 12 hours, you cannot see any visible anomaly, and if you wish to see, you should stain the myocardium with triphenyl benzyl chloride that we saw in the first image. Okay, in 12 to 24 hours you are having dark mottling, that is there is areas of congestion, means reddish blue areas of discoloration will be seen. In 3 to 7 days, if you see, they will develop a hyperemic border. So these are three important gross features that you should keep in mind. Many questions are being asked from this particular part. Microscopically, the most important questions are in days 1 to 3 you are developing coagulative necrosis along with acute neutrophilic infiltration. In days 2 to 7, okay, the picture is dominated by the macrophages, and in 7 to 10 days the granulation tissue appears and becomes very prominent in this time. So these are a few of the important points that you should keep in mind. Now we will start with a reperfusion injury. So what is reperfusion injury? Try to understand. Okay, so suppose if there is a permanent occlusion of the coronary vessel, so in that case what is going to happen? All the tissue is going to die. First of all, the function is going to be lost in the first 30 minutes. The function will be lost completely, and the viability of the tissue, the myocardial tissue, is going to die. So the viability, okay, is going to fall as the time passes. So if I do not do anything, if there's a permanent occlusion, so with time 100% of the myocardial tissue will be lost. Okay, the area under the disc will be lost. But for example, if there is a temporary occlusion, okay, so for example, okay, at a point the blood flow was restored. For example, the patient was given nitroglycerin, a drug was given and the blockage was removed. Okay, for example, so there was a restoration of the blood flow. So ideally we will expect that it is at this point where the blood flow was restored that the myocardium, okay, should be saved from this point, but this does not happen. What we see that it is at this point the myocardium is recovering or starts to recover. So there is this portion in between the restoration and the actual amount of myocardial tissue that is saved, and this amount of tissue that is lost is because of reperfusion injury. So some amount of tissue will undergo irreversible injury even after the flow of blood has been restored. This type of irreversible injury is because of reperfusion, and this type of injury is called as reperfusion injury. So this injury has occurred because I have restored the blood flows. That is why it is called as reperfusion injury. Once more I am going to explain. Okay, just look over here. So when there is a temporary occlusion, okay, with reperfusion, means what? That at some point the blood flow was restored. So I will expect that from this point the myocardium is going to, all the myocardium from this point will be saved, but this does not happen. It is from this point that the myocardium life is saved. Okay, so this part between, so this amount of injury that is there between the restoration of blood and between the actual restoration of the life of the myocardium, okay, so this amount of irreversible injury which has occurred even after restoration of the blood flow is called as the reperfusion injury. Okay, one very important is once the blood flow is restored, okay, so what is going to happen? This is the amount of myocardial tissue that is salvaged or saved. Okay, so had I not restored the flow of blood, this amount of myocardial tissue would have been lost. So this is the amount of tissue that I have saved by reperfusion. Okay, also remember, okay, this is the function. Okay, so once the blood flow was restored, the myocardium started to gain function, but there is something called as post-ischemic ventricular dysfunction. Although the myocardium is alive, it is not functioning properly because it is in shock. Okay, this is called as post-ischemic ventricular dysfunction or post-ischemic ventricular stunning. This is called as post-ischemic ventricular stunning. So in details we are going to read now. Let us see. So infarct modification by reperfusion. So when you restore the blood flow, the infarct is modified in many ways. Let us see how is the infarct modified. So when the blood flow is restored to the ischemic myocardium, though it will limit the size of the infarct, but in the process it will cause some paradoxical injury which is called as reperfusion injury. So we have already read about ischemia reperfusion injury in chapter number 2 of cell injury. Here we are again going to repeat or revise the causes of reperfusion injury. So why this reperfusion injury is occurring? So it is seen that once the blood flow is restored to the heart, there is a mitochondrial dysfunction. Okay, so there is an altered mitochondrial membrane permeability which is allowing the mitochondrial enzymes to come out into the cytoplasm, which is triggering the process of apoptosis. Also, the fresh amount of blood is also bringing in more amount of inflammatory cells that is going to induce more amount of free radical production, leading to free radical mediated injury. Also, it is leading to platelet and complement activation, which is further causing tissue damage. Then there is a leukocyte aggregation. Now more amount of leukocytes, they are coming to the site, they are getting aggregated, and you know that they are the source of multiple enzymes like elastase and protease, which is further going to cause myocardial injury. And lastly, there is a myocyte hypercontracture because of increased intracellular calcium. Now what is happening, that because of excessive amount of blood flow that is going in, okay, a lot of calcium is also entering, which is causing hypercontractility of the myocyte or the myocardium. Okay, now let us see. It is estimated that up to 50% or more of the ultimate infarct size can be attributed to the reperfusion injury. What does it mean? It means that, for example, if the total amount of myocardium is 100%, around, for example, after we restored the flow of blood, around 10% only was the total amount of infarct size. So out of the 10% of the infarct that has occurred, finally 5% occurs because of reperfusion injury. Okay, now if you do not reperfuse, if you do not establish the flow of blood, maybe this 10% can go up till 30 or 40%. So by reperfusion I am saving around 30% of the infarct, but reperfusion itself is also responsible for 5% of the infarct. If you do not understand, it is also all right, but just remember that reperfusion injury is causing some amount of irreversible injury as well. So grossly, if you see a reperfused myocardium, it is hemorrhagic in nature because of vascular injury. And microscopically, what you can see, you can observe contraction band necrosis. What is contraction band necrosis? These are intense eosinophilic bands of hypercontracted sarcomeres because of excessive amount of calcium influx. So because when I am reperfusing, when I am re-establishing the flow of blood to the myocardium, a lot of calciums are coming in, and wherever the calciums will be there, it is going to cause myocardial contraction, and that is going to form contraction bands. At certain areas, the myocardium becomes highly eosinophilic, and these are contraction bands. These are areas where the myocardium has shown hypercontractility. So let us see. So this is the gross image of reperfusion injury. As I told you, the reperfusion injury area is marked by hemorrhage. Dense hemorrhage is there. Okay, so as you can see, this patient had received thrombolytic therapy in the form of streptokinase, which you know is a fibrinolytic agent, and which is going to restore the flow of blood by breaking down the thrombus. So that reperfused area, it shows dense hemorrhage. Okay, this is the area of reperfusion injury, and under the microscope it is shown as dense contraction band. So this is the area which is dense. If you can see, it is dense eosinophilic areas of hypercontractility of the myocardium. Over here also we can see the contraction bands. Again over here one contraction band, again you can see one contraction band. So these are areas of hyper eosinophilia. and it is occurring because of excessive amount of calcium. So these are the areas of contraction band necrosis, which is seen as dark bands, okay, in some of the myocardial fibers, dead myocardial fibers. Okay, so the biochemical abnormality in case of in case of the myocardium might persist for days to week in a reperfused myocyte. Okay, such kind of myocardium is called as a stunned myocardium because there is a contractile dysfunction, and there is nothing to worry in this. Okay, the myocardium recovers in a few days. So what we are trying to say over here, so after reperfusion, okay, the amount of tissue that is salvaged, the amount of myocardial tissue that is saved, okay, although it is saved, it does not function properly. We called such myocardium as a stunned myocardium. Okay, although they are alive, although they they are alive and they are viable, they are not able to function properly, and such kind of myocardium is called as stunned myocardium. Okay, and such stunned myocardium, they recover in a few days. Now remember, myocardium subjected to chronic sublethal ischemia can go into a state of lowered metabolism and function, which is called as hibernation. So after proper treatment is given to the patient, the function will go back to normal. So these are two important terms that you should know. What is a stunned myocardium? What is hibernation? Stunned myocardium is seen especially after reperfusion injury. Now, what are the clinical features of myocardial infarction? Basically, the patient is presenting with chest pain, which is prolonged for more than 30 minutes and which is not, going away even on rest. So and what type of pain it is? It is a crushing, stabbing, squeezing pain associated with a rapid, weak pulse. The patient profusely sweats. So there's a diaphoresis. The patient is having nausea and vomiting. Remember, 25% of the cases, the myocardial infarction will not have any feature. So what are the cases where there is a silent myocardial infarction? So these are diabetic neuropathy and geriatric patients or old patients. Now what are the ECG changes? We have already seen there is a STEM I or ST segment elevation myocardial infarction which is seen, which is indicating transmural or full thickness infarct, and end STEM I, that is non-ST elevation MI myocardial infarction, which is basically referring to subendocardial infarcts. Now the third important thing that we can see are the cardiac biomarkers. Let us understand about the biomarkers with the help of a diagram. So what are the cardiac biomarkers? So these are the enzymes, okay, the levels of which they raise after infarction occurs. Why their levels are taking? What is the rationale behind it? Now basically a myocardial infarct is nothing but an area of coagulative necrosis. So wherever there is necrosis, there is a damage to the plasma membrane, and because of that the enzymes leak. So these are the enzymes, classically they are leaking. So the first enzyme is the myoglobin. It is the first enzyme or the earliest enzyme to raise in the blood. It rises within 2 hours and returns to normal levels in 24 hours. Then we are having CKMB, creatinine kinase. Okay, it is rising in 2 to 4 hours. It is peaking at 24 hours and it is coming back to normal levels at 48 to 72 hours. Then we are having troponin T and troponin I. It is rising in 2 to 4 hours, peaks at 24 to 48 hours and returns to normal level by 7 to 10 days. And then we are having LDH, lactate dehydrogenase, which is rising in 24 hours, peaking at 4 to 5 days and returning to normal level after 10 days. So these are the 4 important enzymes. Now out of this, the best is the troponin. Okay, troponin are the best. Then let us see some important MCQs with regard to the cardiac biomarkers. So the most sensitive and the specific marker of myocardial infarction are the troponins. And if you have to choose between troponin I and T, you will choose troponin I. Troponin I is better and more specific marker than troponin T. The earliest enzyme to rise after myocardial infarction is myoglobin. Remember, it is a non-specific and it is having a negative predictive value. What is the meaning of that? That if the myoglobin test comes out to be negative, it rules out myocardial infarction. But the positive report of myoglobin positivity does not always indicate MI. So myoglobin is having a negative predictive value. Now what is called as flipping of LDH? Flipping of LDH means, remember, that the LDH1 levels becomes more than LDH2 levels. That is called as flipping of LDH. Remember, normal people, the LDH2 level is much more than the LDH1. Okay, remember, but in case of myocardial infarction, there will be a flipping. The LDH1 will become more than LDH2. This is called as flipping of LDH, which is classically a feature of myocardial infarction. The best biomarker of reinfarction. So for example, a patient has undergone infarction. and the patient is admitted to a hospital. So after 3-4 days, again the patient is complaining of chest pain. So there's a reinfarction. So the best biomarker of reinfarction in today's world is troponin I. Now there are some of the cardiac biomarkers which are having a prognostic significance, means it is a future indicator of MI. Okay, so whatever biomarkers we read, they were raised after infarction has taken place. Whereas these biocardial markers, they are having prognostic significance. Their levels increase before MI. So what are the important cardiac biomarkers which are having prognostic significance? We are having highly sensitive C-reactive protein, which is the best and the most sensitive cardiac marker with a prognostic significance. We are having the total cholesterol upon HDL ratio, ApoB protein upon ApoA protein ratio, LDL as well as HDL. So this is the decreasing order of importance of these cardiac biomarkers. Now, what are the complications of myocardial infarction? Let us see. The heart might have a contractile dysfunction. A large portion of the heart might undergo necrosis. Because of that, the heart might not be able to contract properly. This might lead to pulmonary edema. There will be accumulation of blood in the pulmonary circulation, leading to edema, congestion, and ultimately there will be a cardiogenic shock and death. There might be papillary muscle dysfunction. Okay, this might lead to mitral regurgitation, so the valves of the heart might be affected. There might be right ventricular infarction. There might be myocardial rupture, which takes place especially 3 to 7 days, and most common site is the left ventricular free wall. Around 90% patients develop some form of arrhythmia. Okay, they might have heart block, asystole, bradycardia, ventricular fibrillation, etc. Now pericarditis is very important. Okay, it is a fibrinohemorrhagic. It develops 2 to 3 days after MI. Okay, and there is something called as intense pericarditis can develop around few weeks, okay, after the myocardial infarction. So it is a chronic change. So intense pericarditis, which is developing weeks after MI, okay, it occurs because of antibody formed against the damaged myocardium. So there is an autoimmune mechanism behind this, and this intense pericarditis, which occurs weeks after the MI, has a special name which we call it as Dressler syndrome, and it is because of the formation of antibody against the damaged myocardium, and it is having an autoimmune basis. Mural thrombosis can occur because of reduced contractility of the heart, because of a stasis. Okay, so there will be chamber dilatation and there is an endocardial damage, and ventricular aneurysm can also occur, and it is a late complication occurring 7 days after myocardial infarction. Usually this ventricular aneurysm do not rupture. So thank you guys for watching this particular video, and those who are interested to get the notes and the PDF as well as the MCQs related to the topic can join the online pathology class, which is held every Saturday and Sunday on Zoom app. And thank you everyone for providing your support towards this channel. You can contribute via the PayPal links given in the description box, and if you have liked the video, kindly do subscribe and do share with those in need. Thank you very much.